Uh, well, this Atsum, as I mentioned some other times, and I arrived at the ninth edition, so to speak. It's a short condensation of. It's a short material about some important, in my opinion, architectural matters that belong to the present. And atsum in Latin means, I borrowed this name from a very important Romanian philosopher, Constantin Noica, who published a few magazines with this name. And I like the name atsum because it means I am here, I am present. In other words, I'm engaged with my time and my place. So I just showed two works by Junya Ishigami, and I would like to discuss them with you. But if you are more interested, I have another PowerPoint presentation with other works by him, kind of a review of what he did until 2 years ago. So I begin with his interior design work, let's call it this so. And I regret Bruce is not here. I sent him, I asked him what he thinks of this work, which is from a structural point of view, quite provocative. So creates a gravity defying counter system for this Japanese manufacturer of eyeglasses in Shanghai. So striking cantilevered concrete shelves catch the eye in this Shanghai retail space for Japanese eyewear brand jeans. And look at these counters. They are cantilevered on the narrow side, supported by nothing, even for 12 meters. And they have various, is requesting remote control of your screen. What is this? You can, I'm sorry, what is this? Livia is requesting remote control of your screen. I don't understand. You can control it anyway. I don't know what this is. Livia, could you please tell me why did this show up here? I'm recording it, and why do you need the remote control of the screen? I don't like to do this, but I decline because I don't know what to expect. And as you can see, I'm not so flexible. I regret that technology can put me in a difficult spot sometimes. So please forgive me. I ask for forgiveness, and I already ruined the presentation because this is recording, but I decline. Yeah, look at these counters, supported by nothing, only suspended, cantilevered from the narrow side on that wall. So Jeans has unveiled its first Shanghai outpost and retail store located in this financial district with a cantilever concrete display system, an all-white interior designed by Japanese architect Junya Ishigami, situated within a mall on the second floor of the Shanghai World Financial Center. The minimalist store design welcomes visitors with extended and suspended concrete beams that act as gravity-defying display shelves for Jeans eyewear. It's a minimalist interior. It's clinical, as it was described. It's all painted in white. And the only, so-called spectacle are these counters that are cantilevered, indeed spectacularly from the narrow side. The interior has a contemporary industrial feel with the overhead piping and ventilation system left exposed and painted completely in white, presenting a strong focus on the product. The eyewear frames and colors are a stark yet complementary contrast to the surrounding white cabinets and interior. The store features natural white 4000 Kelvin color LED lighting, providing warmth in the clinical environment. Um, I don't know if this is your type of architecture, but I have seen many interiors with so-called minimalist aesthetics. But this one is courageous, but also I imagine expensive because of these, audacious cantilevers. The floating shelf, indeed, it is floating. The floating shelving system was approached as an architectural construction by incorporating a self-contained system of press-stressed cantilevers. To create the suspended shelves, Junya Ishigami worked alongside structural engineer Jun Sato. Ishigami explains, the cantilever structure of the tables is composed of press-stressed beams attached to a column at one side. The floating beams were reinforced by connected H-beams embedded into the adjoining wall, welded to expansive steel sheets set within the floor. Says Ishigami, bowed slightly, this heavy plate acts as a heavy base to keep the upper cantilever in balance. Um, of course, maybe well, perhaps there is a contradiction here between, of course, and maybe. I should settle for one of them. Maybe I settle for I'm still undecided. My Hamletian doubting is not leaving me yet. I wanted to say that perhaps a legitimate question is, was it worth it? I mean, it's a store that sells eyewear, and without doubt, this structural, extravagance was not inexpensive. Now, I know architecture, when it wants to arrive at certain results, it does need a budget. But I'm curious what you think about this. But in terms of aesthetics, it is interesting. And I like the fact that while the floor is smooth, the ceiling is, although we are here, I mean, look, perhaps Mahadev could tell us if this ceiling looks okay in terms of not just aesthetics, but also in its visceral mechanical functioning. I'm impressed by how ordered it appears.
No, the ceiling doesn't look contrived in any way. I mean, that is how you would expect a heavily serviced building. And many of those pipes that you see are not serving this space. They are going through to somewhere else.
I see. But I actually like the ceiling. In fact, it seems to me it's even pleasing aesthetically for me.
Yes, in fact, if it was a plain white ceiling, it might be a little too much. It helps to relieve the sort of minimalism of everything else.
Yes, you are right. So, I think Ishigami, who studied also art, not just architecture, took the right decision here. So the founder and CEO of this company has long held an interest in arts and design, enlisting Ishigami to create, I quote, an architectural expression within a crowded shopping mall. Each of the 5 counters diversifies in length and extends to a maximum of 12 meters, positioned 80 centimeters above the floor at waist height. The architects intended to create a low extended landscape and hence kept each of the tables at an equal horizontal level. I think this is the last image, and it seems it's possible to see the interior of the store from the corridor or something, because this is on the second floor of the some building in the financial district in Shanghai. Okay, now we go. Now I have another short text. The floating shelving system was approached as an architectural construction by incorporating a self-contained system of press-stressed cantilevers. To create the suspended shelves, Junya Ishigami worked alongside structural engineer, we already know this, Jun Sato, and he explains the cantilever structure of the tables is composed of press-stressed beams attached to a column at one side. Sorry, I am afraid that I already read this, so I should eliminate this slide. I am sorry. Now we go to the second work that I would like to discuss with you, is the plaza at Kanagawa Institute of Technology, or Tanagawa, I don't know if how to pronounce, just vis-a-vis across some space from a large building that he already built. But this one, the so-called plaza, is actually a building. It's not a plaza in its well-known meaning of the word, but it's a very interesting work, because while it appears to be a building from the outside, inside you have a different feeling because of these square openings in the roof, through which the rain and the snow can reach the floor. I am a little bit confused actually about this picture, because this opening in the roof appears very large. I imagine, I mean, it is very close to the one who takes the picture. But what confuses me is that I see the reflections of the other openings. There are many squares, many almost squares, these openings in the ceiling, 59, that project, I don't know very well how, maybe because of the sunlight that came diagonally. Also, it is almost surreal, the deformation, or because you have this big, apparently big opening in the roof, and then the human beings are very tiny. So it's a little bit.
I think it's a trick of photography with somebody using a fisheye or a wide-angle lens very close to one of the openings.
I almost said I hope so, because otherwise I cannot explain.
Yeah, I think that must be the case.
What is happening here? This is how the building, the so-called plaza, looks like from the top. And here on the right, you see a small fragment of the other building he designed, but I have it in the other presentation in detail, but not here. But this, I show this to a friend of mine, an architect in Austria, in Innsbruck, and I asked him, Andre, what do you think of this building? And he said, in a puzzling way, he expressed himself. He said, Ishigami stole the salary from his employer. And I asked him, what do you mean? He said, yes, because he did poetry when in fact he was supposed to work for a business. It was his, maybe strange way to saying that that Ishigami here actually achieved poetry, at the expense of serving one's, let's say, business or commercial interest. It is an interesting, I mean, again, I'm not very sure, because now I'm beginning to doubt the veridicity of these pictures. But even as pictures, they do illustrate an architecture or a certain relationship between architecture and uncertainty. That it is atmospheric, because the word atmosphere cannot be avoided here, is even at the level of an intention, is, I think, an interesting one and provocative. But let's read a little bit about this. The text for what I'm reading was written by the architects written by the project curator, I don't know who this is. Anyway, while working on the outdoor plaza for the kite workshop for the Kanagawa Institute of Technology, completed. Actually, it's not such an well. No, that was completed in 2008. The other building, which I mentioned, Ishigami and associates consider two main characteristics: versatility and the semi-outdoor, and what these two would really represent within the project development. Uh, the project resembles to an extent the work done for Rolex by Kazuyo Sejima, for whom actually Ishigami worked, but he's more poetical here. He goes further than Kazuyo Sejima. It is an interesting idea to create a semi-outdoor space within a building and then have the building be penetrated by, as I said, the elements, rain, snow, and so on. The versatility of the plaza was in this case considered from an experiential point of view instead of a practical one, since the campus already had multifunctional spaces with a lack of relaxation area. The users would benefit from a unique space, suggesting a more ambiguous program. Therefore, instead of moving with a specific function in mind, the architect concentrated on the versatile experience of the space with an exploration on the ways to spend time there. The process of passing time becomes the subject. I imagine this came from Ishigami. Um, Somehow these pictures,
Which proves the point about it being a work of poetry rather than functionality.
right, yes, of course, and somehow these images made me think of a great film by Andrei Tarkovsky, The Stalker. I suggest if you didn't see it to attempt to watch it. It's one of the great films ever made, The Stalker. It's about three Russian intellectuals, well, two intellectuals and the stalker walking towards a mysterious zone. And it's a very good film, artistically speaking. Okay, so we move forward. The idea of a semi-outdoor space arose as an in-between design solution. You see the word in-between. Some very good architects are very interested in this in-betweenness. Eisenman mentions it, Fujimoto mentions it, Toyo Ito sometimes. The in-betweenness is really that interstitial space in a way between something that is clear and easily identifiable and measurable and something less. For example, Fujimoto talked about in-betweenness, I mean the in-between function and no function. So since the campus existing and unchanged built landscape was problematic, the latter evidently lacked a natural diversity and provided an artificial setting, school buildings. That is why the architect thought about retaining only half of the existing environment while subliming the other half with the architectural elements. Given that the design is focused, I'm not totally convinced about the text I'm reading. I took it from Archdelli, I think. I'm not sure from where any longer. Anyway, so if there are certain strange linguistic formulations, please consider that they are not necessarily mine. Not that I am not capable of such things. I am. Anyway, given that the design is focused on the experience, the intervention was meant as a new outsideness. By the way of this, a Romanian poet who actually lives and works in the United States, if the verb to work is appropriate for a poet, but it is in a way, yes. he wrote a book called The Disappearance of the Outside. Provocative title. So anyway, the same poet had a strange idea. For example, he said tourists are terrorists with cameras, and terrorists are tourists with guns. He also said that when the Berlin Wall fell, he said, well, we replaced the Berlin Wall with the Berlin Mall. And indeed, the word wall and the word mall, they are very similar. The W is actually an M upside down. Anyway, linguistic, a little bit vicious games. So given that the design, yeah, I read outsideness, this was achieved through specific architectural design techniques meant to create this new composed space. From the outside, besides the roof, which is a little bit, is not flat, otherwise, the walls are vertical, are straight, is a large space defined by clear edges. Uh, um, so both buildings, the one on the left that you see there with a forest of white slender columns, and the one on the right are by Ishigami. Well, he was not the author of the magnificent, even without a lot of green trees in between. I love these trees. And somehow, in between these two buildings, which have it's not an organic architecture. It's the very opposite. The trees are even more emphatically so-called organic and expressionistically so. Landscape can be experienced differently by people, whether physically or mentally. The environment of the plaza was meant to be, I quote, delicate and without a sense of restraint from the existing buildings. The created landscape is meant for users to enjoy the scenery and spend a prolonged time looking into expanding plains of ground and sky, meeting at the end of the grand curved surface and leading the view towards the boundless world on the other outside of the horizon. It is interesting that there are just these spots of light. Geometrically configured, but they become like rugs of light, and you see people are going there, and somehow because it's a limited surface lit by sunlight, it becomes more precious somehow. It's almost like you are at a picnic where instead of a blanket, you have a blanket of light. I improvise some interpretation now. Anyway, I like this picture very much, although I imagine, as Mahadev suggested, that here there was also some artistic, poetical license from the photographer. Because I cannot, where are the square openings on the roof? How come they vanished? Following the first considerations of the initial scenery and the treatment it would receive, the architects had decided to build over the entirety of the site. The 2-meter height difference between the campus ground level and project plane was then exploited to create a new ground space which is integrated within the natural ground. Afterwards, the main structure was conceived as a floating iron plane supported only by the 4 walls and bending into a curved surface with the lack of interior support. The ground was also made concave to echo the ceiling's bend. Both planes bend and stretch, meeting at the end and creating the horizon inside the building. This is how the building looks from above during construction. And Ishigami used this randomness in placing the openings. In other works, he seems to value a lot chains and aleatory manifestations in architecture. He's not the only one. Fujimoto does too, and some of the heroes, if I can call them so, present day architecture in Japan, do so. They are playful. And you see here in the site plan the building, and he built also this one here, but this one is larger, and it's used just for relaxing, I think. The 59 ceiling openings create a playful light filtering effect, mimicking the way the sun shines through the clouds on a dim day. Accordingly, the space transforms depending on the time and weather. Rainy days offer an impressive scenery as the rain flow comes in through the unglazed openings, forming water pillars, interesting, with water pillars, and adding an element of sound to the experience. Thus, the natural changes perceived by the body becomes the architectural scenery. And now we see some drawings for the project, uh, very rigorously done. Yes, there is the playfulness that I mentioned, but this playfulness is balanced by Japanese rigor and great attention to detail. Um, some years ago, when Ishigami received the Golden Lion in Venice at the Venice Biennial, he created an installation that actually couldn't be seen. In fact, it couldn't be seen and felt by a cat, which actually destroyed it with its own tail. Just before the biennial opened, apparently a cat entered the large space within which Ishigami built his extremely thin and almost impossible to see structure. And yes, that's what I read. The cat ruined it, touched one of those very thin wires and destroyed everything. He still got the Golden Lion. So the grand building, which spans at a maximum of 90 meters, required a lot of, so there is no other structural element that supports the ceiling, the roof. 90 meters required a lot of specific considerations with the structural engineering. One of the things that were taken into account was the change of ceiling height, which could reach 30 centimeters due to the thermal expansion and contraction of the iron. What I imagine here is a reference so to the thickness of the ceiling and contraction of the iron plate. There are also 83 piles and 54 ground anchors that were set on the huge concrete foundation beam with the ground sloping at a height difference of 5 meters. The resulting look of the structure then resembles a rotating suspension bridge. This is an engineering work of some magnitude. The human scale is also taken into account with ceiling height ranging from 2.2 to 2.8 meters, while the iron plate of the roof is 12 millimeters thick, confirming to the dimensions of the furniture. What furniture? I didn't see any furniture there. Ribs are installed as compression rings within 3 meters of the roof iron plate's outer conference. I'm a little bit lost here. I hope you are not. Outer circumference in order to reduce the burden of tension exerted on the walls. The latter are 250 millimeters thick, standard for regular building construction. I imagine this was translated from Japanese by someone perhaps less rigorous than the Japanese. I don't know. But the feeling I have is that indeed it seems kind of simple, this whole thing, but it's not simple at all. Just like in the case of the store that we saw, beneath the surface, there are tremendous calculations and a lot of engineering sophistication. Regarding the material used, the ground is covered with water permeable asphalt, which is treated with high pressure cleaning to completely remove the oil before painting. The rainwater can then be instantly absorbed when it infiltrates and flows through the plaza building. Interesting couple here, the plaza building. I mean, not a building in a plaza, but it itself is the plaza, keeping the room dry so that it would not feel unpleasant if users were to sit. That's it. So I could continue now with Guarini, or we could talk a little bit about these two works by Ishigami. You decide. What should we do? Junior Ishigami, he is one of the rising stars. He's already up there, so to speak, quite well known at this point, although he's still young. But he was able to assert himself significantly for the past several years. And he's not the only one. There are architects kind of associated with him. Some of them belong in a way to the group around Toyo Ito, and a few others to the group around Kazuyo Sejima. He worked for Kazuyo Sejima, and then he started his own practice. This is the man. He could look just like a teenager sometimes. Well, he is over 40 now, but still, you know, is this Japanese way of looking teenage-like, even later in life. Yes, the architect, you know, is a bohemian in a way, but we have to understand that this bohemian has a very particular voice, so to speak, in the field of architecture today. And there is actually, I met a student from our university who worked for him as an intern one summer in Tokyo. Unpaid, of course, because Ishigami doesn't pay his interns. Apparently in Japan is some kind of a tradition. I don't agree with this tradition, but it's not for me to agree with it or not. He told me that in his office, he had a huge opening in the floor, some kind of an imperfection. He rented at that time, this was a few years ago, 3-4 years ago, something like this, a space that was perhaps not glorious. So there was a large hole in the slab, which he used to cover when the inspectors came to inspect the space to see that everything was all right. You know, I was curious. I mean, you know, I wondered if no inspector fell in that hole. In the basement, beneath the office of Ishigami. Anyway, here he is with some artwork. He works. He does drawings, and we'll see some of his drawings, which are deal with nature in a literal, figurative way. In a certain way, Ishigami represents, and he's not the only one, the arrival of weakness in the field of architecture in Japan. It's some kind of a heroism in reverse. The heroic Japan after the Second World War was very convincingly represented by Kenzo Tange and other architects like him. But now there is a different different kind of heroism. It's a heroic architecture, but in reverse somehow. We'll understand why. Here he is with long hair, and I think is okay. And he doesn't seem to be too happy here, but I mean, you wonder, you know, this is a young man who had a lot of success, but his face is, of course, the Japanese work very hard, as the Chinese do as well. I remember my daughter telling me that her colleagues, the Chinese students in her high school class and the college too, they were the best. They worked the hardest. while the Americans sometimes, indulge in discos at the end of the week and so on. Not the Chinese, or at least then, no, I don't know now. Anyway, here he is in a more Hollywood kind of attire, but still keeping the youngish look. And yes, this teenager is the author of the two works we saw, and we'll see other works by him. Architecture and uncertainty. This is a subject that interests me too, because for too long, perhaps architecture was associated with certainty, and geometry played a role, and functions played a role. But somehow architecture is flirting a little bit with uncertainty in various ways. And I think it's an interesting subject, because architecture was very often representing power, authority, order. I mean, it's enough to contemplate the facade, the main facade of the New York Stock Exchange, to realize that the tremendous uncertainties within the building are not at all externalized in the facade of the building, with its Greek columns, orderly, distance from each other, and so on. I mean, many palaces of justice and governmental buildings. Fortunately, Trump didn't have his way to so-called build beautiful governmental buildings. He probably had something like this in mind, either all gold, covered in gold, or mimicking some kind of orderly architecture borrowed from Greece or somewhere. Anyway, I'm glad he did. I'm glad he ends now in 2-3 days his so-called presidency. Okay, this is.
I will second that wholeheartedly.
Thank you, Mahadev, and you know very well what you are talking about. More than me, actually, because I was far away. Although when he became president, I launched, but then I was a coward. I took back the text. I'll search for it and I'll send it to you, because I had a feeling it would be a very problematic presidency. Anyway, this is the page, so-called page, his website, which at the time when I took this image, it had just it. There was nothing else, just this page, static, and no other information. Somehow, this quotation from Einstein, which I value a lot, found itself here, but I'm not very sure how, but I'll read it to you. The intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant. We have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift. And I totally agree. And I think in education it's immensely important that we realize the deficiencies associated with the fact that we forgot the gift and we honor the servant. Because the intuitive mind is often, very often, unfortunately, forgotten. And we only trust the reason, the brain, and again the brain. And there is, I think, a deeper truth within us which we continue to ignore. And I'm very happy that Einstein, who do you know? I mean, I'm sure Mahadev, you also live in Princeton, right? Mahadev, are you still here?
Yeah, yes, I do. Yes, very close to Princeton. Yeah.
And, okay, but he lived there, and I saw actually his house with a sloping roof, Einstein's house. Anyway, so one day maybe we'll talk about education, and I would be very happy also if Mahadev would join us about some other thoughts Einstein had about education, because I think he had almost a poetical understanding of what education should be. For example, one of them that comes to my mind right now is play is the best research, or playing is the best research. Or when he says education is what you remain with after you forgot everything you learned. Um, so anyway, there are others. I know them by heart. But we go to Ishigami. Now we see the Japan Pavilion at the Venice Biennial of 2008, which is a typical Ishigami in his attempt to emphasize nature and to de-emphasize architecture. But this is maybe not a correct reading, because on one hand, he still uses the rationalistic language of modern architecture, here at least, except that he makes the structure very, very thin and uses a lot of glass. But it's still, a modernistic, rationalistic approach, although it's some kind of architecture turning against itself. And this kind of architecture is repeated in his work a few times. You would say that this man loves nature, but on the other hand, he seems to like, at least here, although a little bit problematized structure and the grid. So it is as if there are two systems, so to speak, if nature allows me to associate the word system with it or with her. Is the so-called system, but I'm taking back the word. Is the way nature is and acts and functions, and then is the work of man. Ishigami in this case. So this was the pavilion, the Japanese pavilion that he did, and it was very appreciated at that time. At the end of the 20th century, I attended a big symposium at the Columbia University in New York, and the theme was called Afterwards. And there was a philosopher, a lady from Italy, I forgot her name, who advocated weakness in architecture, and Peter Eisenman also did the same thing at that event. And now we see in the 21st century some kind of a weakening of architecture. The geometry used is not really weak, but the materials and all this the transparency, and we see the abundance of nature around. It is as if architecture wants to become more discreet, apparently. I'm not totally convinced that it is much more than an appearance, but the appearance is this, that somehow architecture wants to recede a little bit. On the other hand, what is perhaps a little strange is that, the pieces of furniture are outside of the pavilions, and it is as if the inside went outside. And we could speculate around this as well. Well, this is what the Venice Biennial is for, to provoke ideas, to insight. You see the plan. And I like his crossing the boundaries between architecture and landscape, because if you look at the plan, it's not, well, it's true, the resolution is not very, very, very good, and I apologize. But we still see that the site plan shows almost no architecture. It's just, there are some objects there, or some structures that are unstructured objects. It is a moment of crisis where nature seems to challenge architecture, and from this challenge, this situation happens where there is some confusion. There could be some confusion. He talks about air as architecture. Now, I wonder what Palladio would have thought about this. Air as architecture. The Golden Lion for Best Project at the Venice Architecture Biennial in 2012, participating in artistic director Kazuyo Sejima's curated exhibition. Well, she was the curator, director of the Venice Biennial. People meet in architecture, and as I said, Ishigami worked for Kazuyo Sejima previously, presented the installation Architecture as Air, Study for Chateau Lacoste, an ethereal structure of exceedingly thin rolled carbon fiber pillars and beams measuring in total 4 meters in width and height and 13 meters in depth. Initially, the structure collapsed, as I mentioned before, just hours after the opening. Well, I was wrong, just hours, a few hours after the opening of the August 26 press review. It was after the press review, they didn't yet open for the public. Ishigami continued to refine his ideas on site in the biennial's Arsenale venue, with a final presentation comprising pillars only. In an official statement, the jury commended Ishigami for his unique and uncompromising vision and the work for testing the limits of materiality, visibility, and ultimately of architecture itself. Speaking with Art It in Venice prior to the award ceremony, Ishigami said that a cat had snuck into the Arsenale and wrecked the structure. He spent a full 2 days working to salvage whatever he could of the original materials and provide them more stability. On the experience, he commented, "If I knew from the start that I could pull off the project, then it wouldn't have been interesting." Now, can you imagine a cat ruining architecture? But if the architecture is or was as air, then why not? So this is what he did, not the scallops. In fact, what he did, you cannot see. I hope I have other pictures where you can see a little bit, but you have to understand, the cats are very intuitive, and even a cat was unable to understand what's going on. You kind of see here the thin, very thin lines. Well, that's what he did, Ishigami, and well, I imagine Kazuyo Sejima had a role in this. I'm not contesting that he had he deserved the Golden Lion, but you know, it is a coincidence. His former employer was the director of the biennial then. Anyway, it's an interesting idea. Again, architecture biting its own tail, kind of like the mythical snake, is turning against itself. Yeah, for a biennial, you know, I guess it works, but many architects would contest that this is architecture. But where is the cat? Anyway, here you can begin to see a little bit that it's not so magically absent, the so-called structure. Here is the man, the teenage man, and there we see the tower of the church by Palladio, far away across the water. We saw these pictures. And now this is another installation by him, kind of in the same spirit, like with what we saw earlier. There is a continuity in his work, but he also could surprise us, and we'll see a few other things later. The anemic and the rarefied. So what about this, to create an architecture that is anemic and rarefied? Again, it's architecture biting its own tail, turning against itself. This is an exhibition, I don't know if in Venice or not, with his drawings. And I like this picture very much. You see Kenneth Frampton on the right at the table, and then from the left, behind the woman who sits at the table, you cannot see him, is Toyo Ito, Pritzker Prize laureate. And then is Kazuyo Seijima, also Pritzker. Then Su Fujimoto, who might get the Pritzker. Then I don't know the architect who seems to talk there. Then is Ishigami. And then I don't know the other one. And then Kenneth Frampton. I do think these Japanese are amazing. I mean, they have the largest number of Pritzker prizes. I'm not saying that this Pritzker prize is the beginning and the end of the world. It's not. It doesn't even have perhaps the significance of the Nobel Prize, but it has an aura. And sometimes the architects that who received the prize, um, deserve it. Although Kenneth Frampton declared that he is a little bit skeptical about the works of the people at the table. Because Frampton loves the old generation, the so-called true heroes, starting with Kenzo Tange and the others, Fumihiko Maki, Kisho Kurokawa, Shin Takamatsu. There were many, but still the reality is that Japan gave to the world a lot of very important architects. And, it is a country that really sprang again to life from the ashes of the Second World War. Anyway, they are here at Avery Hall at Columbia. And I wish I had such an audience also when I made presentations here, but I wasn't so lucky. Anyway, this is Toyo Ito here with his peculiar eyewear, and then Seijima and Fujimoto and so on. And this is Frampton, and this is Frampton was 90 years old in November last year. This seems to be Bernard Tschumi, but anyway. So we move forward. I love the intensity of the debate in that school and other schools in the States, and not only in the States, but the States do have some good schools where the quest for architecture is alive, and maybe I idealize it now from far away, but I remember I had some special moments in the Avery Hall. Anyway, this is another project by him, other projects for competitions. Yeah, the anemic and the rarefied. I prefer soft. This is what he says. I prefer soft objects to hard, curved lines to straight. Although we have seen very straight structures, ambiguity to clarity, spatial diversity to functionalism, and naturalness to artificiality. Yes, this is, I don't think he built this, but Toyo Ito did. Actually, I wonder if this is not in fact by Toyo Ito, where he kind of copied, sorry, Toyo Ito, almost plagiarized Frank Lloyd Wright with his mushroom columns at the Johnson Wax building. This is by Ishigami, and we have seen this already in the first presentation. But he was just a model. This is actually not by Ishigami, by Toyo Ito. Ishigami, and we'll see this building. It was built. We saw this. Now this one, in the first presentation, I showed the so-called plaza, and it is on the other side of the row of trees from this building, the Kanagawa Institute of Technology. I like this sketch very much. It's almost some kind of a discreet, delicate quest for some kind of architectural constellation. This is a detail. The Japanese are very scrupulous and very, very astute in their knowledge how to build, the most arcane and almost exotic and esoteric structures. But there seems to be a fascination still with a greed, with whiteness, with thinness. He said that he prefers curves. Well, we don't see too many curves here, do we? Anyway, this was from probably 2012. This is the building that he built, and vis-a-vis it is the plaza that we saw. This is the building with I still use this word, which is a word I like, I confess, constellation of thin columns or poles of various thicknesses and placed randomly within the building. Now, I don't know, probably a stronger kind of cat would be needed here to make it collapse. He probably learned his lesson from Venice. You see how the trees, the magnificent trees, project themselves on the glass facade. In fact, you don't need any kind of decoration. You know, the trees do the job. The reflection on the glass of the building. It is a forest of columns, if I am to quote from the great German poet Hölderlin. Literally, it is well, kind of a, still a Cartesian, if I can say something like this, Cartesian forest of columns. And they have all kinds of events there, like, they strangely perhaps, as it happened at the Venice Biennial, the pieces of furniture are heavier than the building, wooden desks, brown and some heavy. I guess you cannot just have ethereal, anemic things around you. If the building is anemic, then perhaps you need to bring in an oak desk. As you can see there in the back, there are a lot of different kinds of furniture that have a different spirit than the building. As you can see here as well, because they complement each other. You cannot have everything airy and rarefied and anemic. I like this. I don't know exactly what it is. It is some kind of a picture or an artwork. Now, the Cloud Arch, I don't think this work was so inspired. Fortunately, it was not built. I said fortunately, as far as I know. It has curves indeed, but I don't find it especially interesting even. It's just a giant thing. Maybe, I don't know, maybe if it was built, but this is just a project. And look at this, it even moves. I forgot about this because I made this presentation like 2 years ago or so. But even this animation, it doesn't move me a lot. Maybe I'm...
Yeah, it's like the St. Louis Arch on drugs.
Right. Right. Okay, so this was a project. Now the open house. I don't know what this is. It's another project, and it's interesting. His manner of representation. This is his office that I mentioned, or it was. I don't know if his office is still there, with students, interns working day and night, non-stop. Unpaid. Once I even heard a student or someone provoked Peter Eisenman with a question about this, because Eisenman also didn't pay interns, and that person asked him some harsh questions about it. And I saw Eisenman getting very irritated, and he said, we have other ways to pay the interns. We don't have to just give them a salary. We can facilitate for them to enter a good university. They learn a lot. They learn titles of new books and so on. Come on. A student also has to survive. has to eat. But this is a long it's a long story. Even Le Corbusier didn't pay. He didn't pay Doshi until Doshi almost got an ulcer. He got sick. There is a picture with the studio of Le Corbusier where there is Doshi who got a Pritzker Prize 2 years ago, but 20 or so, 23, 24, I don't know exactly his age. He's there near the master with all the people who helped Le Corbusier, and Doshi looked like someone on the verge of dying. Well, I listened to a confession by Doshi that he had almost nothing to eat. But do the star architects care that the mere, intern has almost nothing to eat? Sometimes I turn even against the great masters because I don't think it's fair. They build the fame on the sacrifices of people who sometimes, yes, get sick. Anyway, this never
Well,
happened.
there is I would call it a rumor because I've not verified it for myself, that many years ago, Richard Meyer was actually censured by the AIA for charging interns to work at his office.
Incredible. Kind of like, thank you, Mahadev, kind of like Frank Lloyd Wright. Frank Lloyd Wright, of course, he didn't pay the students who flew from all over the world to have the chance to work the land for Frank Lloyd Wright and to take care of his animals. Apparently, he had some kind of a farm on, in Arizona. And they cooked and they did all kinds of things. And the Wright thought that this is a part of the training, the architectural training, and when I hear that Meyer, charged the students to pay him in order to have the chance to work for him, is just. But I know such examples in Romania as well, where the students pay in order to have the chance to build some buildings for a professor of theirs. Anyway, human beings are obviously not always right. Project for the cafeteria on the campus of the Kanagawa Institute de Paris developed horizontally on a single floor with a surface of about, this is about the project you saw on, covered by a thin steel roof that floats at the height of, no, I think it's that one that we saw at the beginning. Yes, and now we have a chance to look at the students, because I know that in Japan, they work a lot with large scale models, and really, I mean, look at this. It's very intricate and large and complex, and look how many studies on the walls. I mean, in a way, I admire the intensity of the work, the amount of the work. I mean, you can make an exhibition just with these approximations of what Ishigami would have liked to arrive at, and in the end, I guess he arrived at. Yes, this doesn't look like the typical office of a star architect. Maybe he was struggling too financially with all these exotisms. Do you see how big the model is? I mean, look at the. It's almost. I'm exaggerating. It's not. Maybe it's covering that hole in the slab that I mentioned. Anyway, is it him there or not? I can see very well with my glasses. But this is the model of the building that we saw at the beginning. The house designed for a young couple demonstrates that for Ishigami, the act of making architecture has the same value as the act of creating a landscape. Well, is it truly the architect who creates a landscape? I mean, it's almost like you are very close at asserting that the architect made nature, and it's not true, of course. I mean, landscape architecture. Maybe the word architecture was dropped for some reason. But, the man who loved the curves obviously built almost a cube here. The building that's what I said. Behind the airy, the airs architecture, behind the atrophied architecture. Actually, there is a rationalist who is quite at home in employing rectangular forms and rectangular architecture. Um, so he's probably fighting with that rationalist who is probably still present within him. Just like Eisenman. Eisenman said that any building should always start with a grid, but it's not so. I mean, Alvar Aalto didn't start with a grid, and he was obviously a very accomplished architect. And there are others. Even Kahn only sometimes has some kind of a suggestion. So no, this is Eisenman, who at bottom is still a rationalist, but a rationalist who turns against himself through weakness, through blurring that he's so fond of. A Magical Land, Art and Architecture, the Drawings and Fantasies of Junya Ishigami, Japan. His drawings are very, they do have poetry, but this is not a typical, architect's drawing. It's very lyrical, almost infantile, or maybe even without almost. It is infantile. And I don't know. I'm a little bit undecided about this. It's not often that the fantasy drawings of an architect turn into buildings or designs with the same intensity of the fantasia. Zaha Hadid had this power, yet the fantasy worlds of the beautiful drawings of Junya Ishigami really take on the same feel in his built work. This is magic, somebody wrote. Look at this drawing. It has a feeling that it has almost nothing to do with architecture. Table as water, design Junya Ishigami. Here he did a table that he seems to be very interested in floating. So this table, which actually receives objects on it, so there is weight on it, it appears to be floating, and it's very, very thin. So it's a sophisticated construction, engineering construction, and I'm not very sure I am sufficiently well equipped with technical knowledge to describe it. Is with a pressed steel plate from the factory, and he did kind of something in a way similar also at that store with the eyewear, and to an extent even the large plaza, so-called building or semi-outdoor construction. So he did this table. Obviously, he's interested to get rid of gravity, if possible, by all means. So this amazing 3 millimeter thin table, 3 millimeters of aluminum by architect Junya Ishigami floats because it has been bent and it levels out with its own weight. The table is so thin, like paper, that it undulates when touched and gives the impression that the objects are floating on water. Here it is. So probably some kind of, I don't know why this very unacademic expression, a closet magician. He probably is interested in magic, to make things appear that they are floating, that they are weightless, and that they escape gravity.
Yeah, I think you're right, because even in the first two projects that you showed, there's a lot of illusion involved, because you do not see the means by which those cantilevers and other things like uh, the architecture plaza, a lot of stuff is hidden that is necessary in order to create the illusion.
Yes, yes. You expressed it very well, Mahadev. Thank you. So, you know, yeah, it is an illusion, but behind the illusion, there is heavy work on the part of the engineer and, sophisticated construction and so on. A family chair by him. He designed. I don't know about these chairs, to be honest with you. I don't. They are not really my taste. And although I do not like particularly comfort, but I don't imagine they are very comfortable either. They're just kind of like his drawings, sketches of, linear entities here that. Ideas of chairs in a way. Anyway, as for modern product design, one feels that the climax in minimalism had been reached by a steel table, the one that we saw, 9.5 meters long, 2.6 meters wide, made of a single press-stressed 3 millimeters thick steel plate, which rested just on four legs on its corners. It was the invention of Ishigami Junior Ishigami, a young architect from Tokyo. It simply reminds us of a the word magician's floating or levitation act, but which is, we know very well how these so-called magical acts happen. There is always a trick there. That's what it is. The large table, located in a gallery space and covered with food, plants, and tableware, is so thin that it has been nicknamed the magic table. By the way of this, I read once a book written by a psychoanalyst in the United States, a lady, I forgot her name, who said that in the life of anyone, there are four ages. She claimed that the first age is when the young person until he or she is 18 is an orphan. It was her idea that we are all kind of orphans, even those with very good parents and so on. But because of the tensions between generations and so on, we are kind of orphans. And that's why the baby, when the baby is born, cries. But around 18 begins the second age, the age of being a martyr and a hero. So, the young person wants to change the world, and it takes a lot of weight on his or her back, like a camel, and wants to be heroic, wants to fight, wants to change things. But life is not so malleable, unfortunately. So, the young person grows in age, and around 40, disillusioned and disenchanted because the then world was unmoved and they couldn't change, becomes very depressed and becomes a wanderer. So this is the third age, and I experienced it too. You become a wanderer, a decentered person. And if you escape the great dangers associated with losing one's center, you enter in the fourth age, that is the magician's age. You become a magician. And that's why the relation with the table. The magician is the one who is able to negotiate with and to play with various balls and non-falls, because the magician arrived at being a magician by going through being an orphan, being a hero and a martyr, unsuccessful of course, and then being a wanderer. Sorry about this, going a little bit off the subject. Here is the I don't know if it's Ishigami there or not. And again, this strange, perhaps, table, an overly rational thinking process reverses. You see, I had this intuition into the creation of an almost irrational product. Yes, it is a reason with a minus sign in front of it. just like in the case of Eisenman, although the comparison probably ends there. These are, some sketches that he did. This is how this press-dressed tabletop was manufactured in a factory, and it is interesting and probably a very expensive, installation, but he did it. And you see the objects which are not weightless on top of this almost non-existent table. People, tourists, visitors, they look underneath because they don't believe their eyes. And I'm sure they look in the same way in that store with eyewear because what the structure is more interesting than the eye face. Anyway, moving forward, lots of pictures, some more drawings by him, very childish, apparently non-heroic, or this is a different definition of what the word heroic might assume. The mountain city. But I do have to say that our age seems to promote, or at least until the arrival of the pandemic, some kind of a cultural infantilism through the TV, through, I have seen it even in great universities, having a lot to do with a fun mentality. When the fun mentality rules, then it's very almost very easy to fall into an infantile culture. The obsession with eternal bliss. Everybody smiles and laughs, and we all eat popcorn. And then there is, of course, Walt Disney and the entertainment industry. All these things together make us rather infantile. And you have on the other side the anxiousness and the psychoanalyst. But this aspect, here there is some innocence apparently, as it is in this drawing. Again, apparently, I don't know very well, but somehow maybe Friedrich Nietzsche was right when he said the human being is the only one who suffered so much that he had to invent laughter. Well, maybe our lives are actually so unsatisfying that we invented fun, we invented infantilism. We have to go back, at least in our imagination, to some kind of, or the appearance of innocence, because everything around us is not innocent at all. Capitalism in its high manifestations is not a very innocent human invention. So now we see here, the cubicle not curved at all, drawings of the architect, and then the inflations called hills. Anyway, a bus station. It was not built as far as I know, and I almost said fortunately, that the building is not so innocent, nor so organic or curved. A mountaintop facility in Yashima, Takamatsu City. I don't think he built this, but he's interesting still because he everywhere in his projects there is nature in some form, and sometimes the building mimics nature, landscape. You'll see a competition entry. He actually won that competition. It's not this one, but we'll arrive at it. But looking back in our journey today at that image from his studio where there were so many large drawings with approximations of what that receives respect from me. Not that he needs my respect, no, but I just want to say that all that amount, obviously there was a lot of work there. And so he was intensely searching for something. So what appears to be light-hearted and, maybe infantile, perhaps the road towards it is not, it's an arduous one, is a complicated one, a difficult one. Polytechnic Museum in Moscow, I don't know exactly what he did here. I only have that image. The Bauhaus Museum, which he didn't win, someone else won it and built it. Here we see again the white rectangular Cartesian architecture, broken as it is to allow the trees to assert themselves. But I don't know, do we need this? It is the dialectic interplay between nature and man or architecture. But we see here the anticipation of the building we just saw at the beginning of the presentation. So there are certain themes that run through his work. Now this is a house. If we can call it a house, is an installation. He actually built, but I don't have it here. It was done after I made this presentation. An interesting work somehow, and I regret I don't have it here because I had something to say about that work. A nursery. I don't know. I still think Ishigami is the product of our time, if I can call a human being the product. He belongs to our time, which is a time, I think, as I said, and maybe I could be opposed, but I have a feeling that somehow this quest for innocence or even infantilism is the other side of the same coin. The first face of the coin being, in a way, the heaviness of excessive pragmatism, material concerns, excessive, obsession with money, with progress, with all the excesses of our time that brought upon us the climate change, the rising level of the seas, the pollution, and all the rest. So now we try to imagine some kind of innocence, some kind of a paradise that doesn't have the weight of just imagine now the multitude of the immense amounts of cars running on highways, and all the excessive of late modernity. He's searching here for some kind of opposition, but this opposition to me seems somehow, as I said, the other side of the same coin. This is he won this competition, but I don't think it was yet built, where he's mimicking natural landscape, but it is architecture. These hills are covered with grass and flowers, but they are not hills. It's a structure that is built by man. Imagined by him. But look at that entertainment, that huge ship behind it. The truth of our assault on nature is exemplified. Yes, we can mimic now the hills, which we leveled. We flattened the hills. China is doing it constantly. They flatten mountains and hills, as Wang Shu quite well deplored. But the touristic mammoth industry that is symbolized by that huge ship, which is not innocent at all. So yeah, we kind of recreate the hills, but the truth of our assault on nature is shown clearly behind the so-called hills. Perhaps we should abstain for a while from all these pleasure trips, all these fun trips. the terrorist with a camera, as that poet described the tourist. Uh, anyway, peace, tradition, and nature. There is nothing more exciting than creating a scenery from these ordinary elements. Well, I don't think they are ordinary at all. I mean, to call peace, tradition, and nature ordinary, I'm sorry, I hope it wasn't him who said this. There is nothing more exciting than what we have never seen before. Well, he's contradicting himself right here, you know. On one hand, he calls them ordinary, and on the other, he says we have never seen them. Peace, tradition, and nature. It's strange. Anyway, I express myself in a dubious way, certainly not very academic, nor no rigorous critic would say something like this. Anyway, nor anyway. This word also should be banished from serious intellectual discourse. So this was his project, you know, this undulating man-made structure that mimics natural relief of landscape. It won. He won. He won the competition. He's good. He's good at winning competitions. He doesn't have the fears that Frank Lloyd Wright had, who said, I will never take part in competitions because how could I allow my work to be evaluated by a mediocre committee? But Ishigami doesn't have this fear, and it pays. It was not built, but maybe it will be built. Although I think the pandemic will question the legitimacy of such huge ships for a while at least. I hope for a long time. This is a park he proposed, I think, in Sweden. Oh, this was actually built, and I wanted to. I have seen it built. It was built in the Netherlands. It was built, and it looks kind of like in these illustrations. The quality of nature is that it is governed by certain rules, which at the same time we are never really aware of. I am interested in creating something that would merge into this normalcy that surrounds us. I don't know. Sometimes artists are a little peculiar in the way they articulate what they think. And you know, this is the model or an image of what he did. This was built. Now, if you search for Ishigami on the web, Google Images or whatever, you'll see this thing being built. The drawing is anemic, indeed. It is an anemic drawing, but he wins competitions with such anemic drawings. What can we say? That's why I'm saying we do live in an infantile culture, because such a drawing at the time when Frank Lloyd Wright was doing his drawings, I mean, at that time, I wonder what Wright would have said about this drawing. This is almost inconceivable that an educated adult would draw like this. But this is a reaction to a harsh reality, the one that I mentioned, I think. I have in this presentation, I think, a few artworks by Dufy, Raoul Dufy, a great French painter who kind of worked in this way, although there are differences. Serpentine Gallery in London, he built it, or pavilion rather. Here we have heaviness at the top on thin poles. I don't know, all these slates, the slate on top. I don't know. I don't think it's, personally, I don't think it's so great. And it is a little bit almost apocalyptical, you know, when you have the stone. If you are to live, you go underneath this stone that is mimicking again some kind of a hill. You know, it's another pavilion. We know the others built for Serpentine Gallery. But we see here the stone kind of elevating itself. I mean, it was brought upwards by the will of the architect, and the meaning of this maybe maybe it's not so difficult to decipher it, but I'm not totally convinced about this. I mean, really, do we need all these efforts? I mean, look at the trees, looking at the work of man, and they wonder, probably the trees wonder, what are they doing? Why are they doing this? Although we shouldn't ask this question, when it has to do with art. But maybe mythologizing art too much is also problematic. And here again, the exterior is misleading. We have this rather kind of organic, undulating roof, and then underneath is supported by, as we can see, rows of, straight poles. The Cartesian cave, maybe. This is not one of my preferred works. Now this one, House and Restaurant, this one was, I hope I have, yeah, I have some images, but it was built, and it's interesting. But again, it's about eating. Yes, the owner of the house, of the restaurant, also lives there, the cook. Japanese architect Ishigami is constructing, he already constructed it, a cave-like restaurant in Yamaguchi, Japan, that looks like it was tunneled by giant worms. Ishigami went about creating the unique architecture by digging holes in the ground, filling them with concrete and burrowing out the soil around them. It is the same kind of play with acting in reverse, and it works. Actually, I like this image that, and you see here he does allow chains to function. If I have a question or a reticence, or I don't know how to call it, is again something having to do with our obsession with living in order to eat instead of eating in order to live, because all this extravagant work, rather extravagant, what is its function? So this so-called primitive, surrounding is done in order to have the, cute, mundane bar and a restaurant. So you have some titillation, just like Snohetta built a restaurant too, so you can see the fish under the water. Here we go under the ground, apparently, so we mimic a cave, but essentially it's a modern function. We are just lying to ourselves. We are not Neanderthal men. We are not. We have microwaves. We have all kinds of sophisticated electrical equipment, and now we flirt with the playing. Being primitives, but I don't know. I think it's something a little perverse here and a little upside down. And when so many people in the world have nothing to eat, we create the illusion, we mimic a cave. We build a man-made so-called cave, which is actually a restaurant or a bar. It's all about consuming, eating in order not to cry, because all this obsession with the diet that we have these days, it is an obsession. What was your diet? Did you go to the health club? Did you exercise? We need to be slim in order to hide away the incredible assault on the resources of the earth. And that is because we live in order to eat. Look at it. It's actually ridiculous. Can you imagine Neanderthal man, sitting on that kind of bar stool and, ordering a martini or something? Is something here that I don't know. My heart is not. It's not vibrating in a positive way when I see this. But I like here, I like this attempt to bring in the raw, RAW, the one that Zaha Hadid was searching for and she never arrived at. This I like, the earth with its primitiveness, with its visceral power. I like, but what for? I mean, you do this in order to bring back to your life some kind of a rawness or something archaic, but the function is actually very mundane and having to do with commerce and again eating and drinking, as if the whole purpose of life is this. Shakespeare said clearly in one of his plays, I forgot exactly the words, but something like this. What is a man whose purpose is just to eat and drink and so on? He called that human being a beast. And I actually think we are a little bit on that side now with our obsessions, with the diet, with what we eat, with the food, with the calories, with the industry. That's it. Maybe I didn't end the presentation too gloriously, but there are 12 people here, and I think the number 12 is recording. Guarini, so the 17th century, that's when he lived. He died at 61, no, 59. At that time, architects didn't live such long lives as they do these days. Guarini, this was the man, at least seen in an engraving. Many times these engravings are not really accurate. Often they are done after the one depicted he died. But let's imagine he looked kind of like this. He was an interesting man. An Italian architect of the Piedmontese Baroque, active in Turin as well in Sicily, France, and Portugal. He was a priest, a mathematician, and a writer. I love this. A priest, a mathematician, and a writer. When are we going to have again architects who are priests, mathematicians, and writers? But he used mathematics at a very high level to build some incredible domes. Some drawings by him. He published some books, and not just about architecture. The stereotomy, the art of cutting the stone. He has lots of studies, and you can find on the web. There is an office, an atelier, or a website that, starting from his drawings, they do digital drawings studying stereotomy. Yes, you do need to be a mathematician to do something like this. But he used the abstraction of such drawings in order to build incredible structures, just as Ishigami uses sophisticated engineering in order to arrive at his illusions. Guarini is not really generating or didn't generate illusions, but beauty and complexity. Such studies show sophistication, an interesting geometry that was far from ordinary. I mean, to build a dome that was functioning correctly, structurally, was not an easy matter, especially when you wanted to create something new, as he did. So you see on the side, on the right side, the mathematician, and on the left side, the architect. There are many drawings, I mean, books. I only have a number of them here. Guarini moves me a lot because he shows me, and he's not the only one, of course, but Guarini shows me a kind of architect that I would love to encounter again. An architect who is a mathematician, who is a writer, who is a thinker, in other words, and who is a humanist, and who has cultural interests, And I don't think this monk had a business mentality. No, he practiced architecture just as Borromini did, who refused to get paid when he built his masterpiece, San Carlo alle Quattro Fontane. What architect would do something like this today? You know, and this this businessman that the architect so often is today depresses me. You know, that's why architecture became so vulgar so many times, because we don't have any longer. I mean, very rarely actually. There are some examples, but not very often, where an architect dedicates truly his life to the quest for beauty. Essentially, I mean, sorry for using such a so-called banal word as beauty, but this is what it is. And yeah, yes, he built churches, but not only churches. He also built a few palaces, and you are going to see them. Yes, he didn't build, unfortunately, for the poor, but yeah, his age was not righteous either. What can we do? What can we do? What can we say? This is one of his drawings. Uh, he did all kinds of drawings and studies for his buildings. He built, and you see now a building that was completed by Juvara, another important architect. He started it though, Guarini, and sorry, not all images are very appealing or easy to look at. He was a Baroque architect, but any great architecture doesn't matter to which so-called style belonged or belongs, is great in the sense that it could be excessive, but not to such an extent that it becomes indifferent about that continuum that unites in the end all periods in art, despite the differences. What I'm trying to say is a Baroque building could be very well admired by a minimalist because it contains a truth. It appears to be excessive, but there is excessiveness even in nature, and life itself has. Once I wrote a little, if you allow me to not to read it, but to recite it for you, very short, if I can call it poem, maybe a little pretentiously. It goes like this: less and more. Many times, less is less. A few times, less is more. Many times, more is less. A few times, more is more. So when there is a certain level of excellence in the work, then more is more. And also less is more. But very often, less is less. Let's not imagine that what Mies meant by less is more is applicable everywhere, every time, because it's not true. There are so many, unfortunately, so many buildings that where you could say, you see the less, but that less is not more, it's not more.
I
Also,
like your poem. It's very insightful.
thank you, Mahadev. And so the same with the Baroque, quality Baroque. In that case, more is more, but there are many instances where abundance is not more, it's actually less. Anyway, this is a drawing by Guarini. This is the building, and it's certainly not less. And the Baroque in Turin, in this Italian city and northwest of Italy, is different than the one in Rome. Well, the facade is not Baroque really, it's rather classical. But what you see above and what you see inside is Guarini. And yeah, the building was finished by Juvara, but I don't know exactly what Juvara did. The splendors of Italy. I mean, they have so many incredible churches and so many important architects that just this, would have been the pride of many cities and towns in the world, and they have just in Turin, I don't know how many, because the church was very powerful, and the Italians are talented design, as you know, and so it was a great meeting between the ecclesiastical power and the imaginative power of the Italian designers. Collegio dei Nobili from 1678, also in Turin. This is a secular building, but we look at the facade, and it has richness. It is although there is the rhythm and it's regular, there is regularity, but because of the richness of the facade, there's so many details, and it's controlled, but it is animated by a Baroque feeling, although the structure is Cartesian. It's not a bad building, I would say. And then look at this window. It is an event in itself, just the window and the window frame. How many architects could afford today to design a window like this? And it was done, by hand, brick above brick above brick, and it's very nice. I think it's a sensitive work, and it does show complexity, and we'll arrive at some amazing things very soon. Somehow I wonder, and I mentioned this before, if 3D printing would generate equally convincing, because yes, it can be done. You make the drawing, you make the project, and then you instruct the machine to 3D print. What we see here was done with sweat, with human sweat. In the case of 3D printing, it is the printer that sweats, so to speak. But I don't know. It would be interesting to compare, actually, handmade work with a work printed, 3D printed. The same work, the very same work. Because I think the imperfections, although I know there are sophistications now where you can instruct the machine to generate imperfections too. But I still wonder if they are the same in terms of, yeah, I think you understood what I wanted to say. Anyway, this is a palace. I like these old photographs. That's because I'm a nostalgic man, and I like old books and old photographs and almost anything. But I also love the new. I describe myself once in my imagination as being some kind of a, well, the word in English, I can't find it now, an avant-garde antiquarian, if there is such a word. I'm not sure, antiquarian. Like the keeper of a second-hand bookstore, but an avant-garde one, which is oxymoron. Anyway, Turin. Now the chapel. This is a great work, one of his most important works, the Chapel of the Holy Shroud. In Turin, 1668. They labored a little bit at this work, 26 years. But look at this though. My God, if I had a hat on my head now, I would take it off immediately. This is an impressive work. It has vigor, it has geometry, it is you can trust this dome, but it's so innovative, and it's what is underneath it is more common, but what is there, the top is almost unbelievable, and it appears to be kind of predictable and simple, but it was not. This kind of dome, I am not an expert in domes, no, not at all, but I have seen some those in the histories of architecture or in my trips. Guarini is very, very particular. And it is a very interesting Baroque art in his architecture, almost with something Islamic a little bit in some parts. It's a hybrid, if I can say something like this, it's a hybrid. There is a certain hybridity in his Baroque architecture. This layering, this fragmentation towards the top, but it's a geometrical. You see how it was built almost, and it's somehow it is, but it's also in the process of becoming. You see, it's becoming. I don't know if I expressed well. It's an excellent work. What can we say? And a very ample work. And you know, we just arrived at it after contemplating the anemic, rarefied architecture of Ishigami. And in a way, it's interesting to compare. Now, this is 300 years later, a little bit more than 300. What happened to humanity? Could you have imagined the architecture of Ishigami at the time of Guarini? Why are we looking for? Why are we afraid of now? I'm too, a little bit too tired now to venture into with this kind of questions I am asking myself now in my head, but I should keep them in my head. What happened to the world in 300 years that we don't have any longer the desire, or at least from the perspective of Ishigami? You saw his drawings, you saw his buildings, and now we see Guarini 300, a little more than 300 years earlier, building very differently. And but coming back to the architect as an intellectual, as a mathematician, mathematics is beautiful. I mean, it's. I think the great mathematicians were poets, actually, with numbers. They wrote their poems with numbers, and I wish we have again that kind of mathematician, and probably there are. And you know, some colleagues of Mahadev at Princeton, I'm sure there are some great minds, great mathematicians who work within the field of mathematics as if in the field of poetry. But architects are, I don't know, that kind of mathematician in architecture, I do not know. Maybe some researchers, some architects who work with a very sophisticated way, digitally, or I don't know. We see here almost a snake. No, it's some kind of a snake, and you know, what is the snake doing there in the sky? And here is what is it? Is it the sun or the moon or the new moon? Or I have the intuition that there is something a little bit Islamic, although he was obviously a Christian and a monk. But I know examples of Muslim architecture, that Islamic architecture, that are not very different from what we see here. The stalactites and the stalagmites, you know, there is something here. Maybe I don't know, or maybe it was just his imagination, his way of doing architecture. Is the invention of the Passion capitals in the chapel, this chapel that we saw, the Holy Shroud in Turin. There is an interesting article. Unfortunately, the pictures I couldn't incorporate in my presentation because they were too small, and I don't know, something was sabotaging me. I don't know if I should read this. The Corinthian capital variant, Guarini, especially designed for the major order of the chapel, serves as an example of the architect's concern with projecting meaning through architectural form, employing construction documents from the Archivio. That this study reconstructs the production history of the famous gilt bronze Passion capitals. This is a text written by a historian, and historians can For me, it can be a little bit tiring, but I have the, if you are interested, I have the link to this article. Um, I couldn't find pictures of this specially created capital inspired by the Corinthian order, which is the closest in a way to Baroque. And I don't know exactly how he modified it, so it became it's called the Passion Capitol. But here is a link if you can photograph it, or you can I don't know, through in some way, if you are interested. It's an interesting article, but long and filled with pictures that at low resolution. The Royal Church of San Lorenzo, this is another important project by him, also in Turin. Look again at the dome. It is so virile, and so unique, original. But most domes are not like this. This is Guarini. It does look modern, the dome. Not so much what is underneath here. It's very possible the building as a whole was begun by someone else. He did a dome. You see, the dome is a different architecture. It's abstract. You can see that this man was a mathematician who loved geometry and expressed it powerfully. Great domes. More creative in a way, yes, in terms of engineering, the one done by Brunelleschi in Florence, yes, is truly an important dome. But architecturally, in terms of expression, those by Guarini are very personal and very interesting. Outside the building, I don't think he did this actually, because he cannot be. We saw his stay, so to speak. He's there at the top. That's how the building looks like from afar, a little bit from afar. From the outside, even the plans are very interesting for these domes. Very intricate, and there's something labyrinthical. And again, I see some kind of, I'm not an expert in Islamic architecture. I wish I was, because I love it, but I don't know enough about it. But I see here some cross-cultural elements somehow. A castle from 1676, 1984. This is, it is indeed, I don't know if a castle, but a big villa, something in between a castle and a villa. I have a few pictures with this building. So he didn't build only churches. He also built, until 59 when he died, he built other kinds of buildings, and not just in Turin or Torino, as it is called in Italian. Palazzo Carignano, yes. This one, this is a picture from the beginning of the 20th century, probably, with a very lively facade because of the ornate nature of it. And it is a Baroque that is so different from the one in Rome. A lot of brick is being used, and this differentiates it from Rome. Interesting building. Too bad it is a palace. I don't like usually palace or castles, but that's because I'm probably envious. Because if I was born on the right side of life, so to speak, I would have had a palace myself, maybe designed by myself. I don't know, or become a new kind of John Portman, designing hotels for myself. Look at the facade. It has character. It is embroidered with bricks. Although you can tell we are beyond Renaissance. We are already on our rushed way towards modernity. This is the 17th century already. But there is still nobility in terms of the art of construction. There is. And Guarini is serving the nobility of architecture. He served it very well in the 17th century. This is a sanctuary, Santuario della Consolata, also in Turin, but was restored lately by others. Strange the exterior of some of these buildings. They are rather almost classical and very, you know, in a way, I mean, different. The palace that we saw before was more Guarini than this building, but inside is something else. We'll see. Here, I think also there are interventions by other architects. There is too much heaviness and gold and opulence. This is not Guarini now. No way, this is not Guarini, and I'm glad it's not. Even here, it's not him. Maybe these are the so-called other interventions. Now, Chiesa dei Padri Somaschi in Messina, this is interesting. It's a smaller building, but I think it expresses better what Guarini stood for. Unfortunately, I only have the drawings. I don't know what happened with the building. The only picture I found was that one. Very small and insufficient. But the drawings and the plan in particular, there is even a book published by him, Il progetto di Guarini per la Chiesa dei Somaschi a Messina. This is nice about architecture, even if the building collapses or is demolished or is not even built. But for the intellect and for the imagination, sometimes the project does a good job. It might not be total or totally good or sufficient, but it is important. And I mentioned Eisenman before. Peter Eisenman thought actually that the drawings, the project, are more important than the building. I'm not very sure that it is so, but from one position, he might have some truth in what he said. That even Ginny Gang said that an intellectual construct is necessary in life. Without it, life is boring. For that intellectual construct can manifest itself in a project, in the plans, in the sections, in the axonometric view, and it is still architecture, even if not confronted with the elements. Chiesa della Santissima Annunziata, also in Messina. This is a drawing that was done by him. And you see again a particular kind of Baroque architecture. This was, I have a few pictures. And I like it like this. Is you know, asymmetrical and a little bit ruined on the left, and you see the passage of time. The romantic side of me sympathizes with it, and even in this picture, which shows some level of degradation, but still the building has the nobility of the spirit that generated it. Chiesa di Santa Maria in Araceli. This one is in Vicenza, and I have been in Vicenza a few times. I never knew that Guarini built in Vicenza. It's a building that is actually attributed to him, so I guess there is no certitude. Then I found other information that he worked with another architect, but I think he was involved, and we'll see the ceiling, hopefully. Yes. Now, when I discovered this, I knew nothing about this until this morning, today. But I would love to compare this with the ceiling of San Carlo alle Quattro Fontane by Borromini in Rome, who also worked with an ellipse. But this one has a circle at the top that is different from what Borromini did. This is more calm at the top. Otherwise, the ellipse could be scandalous because of the two circles that form an ellipse, and that could puzzle the intellect. It is an interesting building. I wish I knew more about it, and I feel tempted to maybe next year on his birthday I can investigate it a little bit. Until then, okay, and some details from the same building. The spiral again. The spiral is another provocation for the one who wants the easy way out. That is with a circle. Spiral is more complicated. Even Brâncuș, our countryman, when he was asked by James Joyce to draw a portrait of him, he initially did a figurative drawing, and James Joyce expected something more abstract. So he challenged Brâncuș to do another one, and Brâncuș in the end did a spiral. And that spiral that Brâncuș, the sculptor, did is so perfect that I really wonder, did he do it with a free hand? It's just amazing. If he did it with a free hand, it's just unbelievable. You can find out about it on Google Images. Just type in Brâncuș portrait of James Joyce and you see the spiral. Brâncuș was not a mathematician, but that spiral was as if he drew it point by point mathematically. It's just incredibly perfect. And some sculptures, these are probably not done by Guarini, but there are interesting things here, almost surreal, that conglomerate of vegetables, or I don't know what it is there. Strange things. The interior, I don't know about these columns, and we have seen things like this. Other images from his work, and now I go quickly, just to say goodbye to Guarini through a short marathon of images, and of course we'll wish him a happy birthday. This is glorious. Glorious. I think it is glorious. And we have seen already the work, the drawings by him, a section through this chapel. We looked at it under a different name. It's also called the Sindone Chapel. This is actually also again this picture, the last picture of my presentation. I love this meeting between aesthetics and geometry. Or as Matila Gica would have said, as the title of his book is, that I saw on a shelf in Stephen Hall's office many years ago, The Geometry of Art and Life. Yes, the geometry of art and life. This also has something of, I have seen temples, Hindu temples in India that are, I don't know if this was carved into the stone, into the earth, it was excavated almost. I have seen such beautiful, beautiful temples. And the section, is not so dissimilar, or potentially very similar. Cultures do meet.
Yeah, the thing I would say about this work by Guarini is that it is geometrical, and the structural forces are very clearly visible in terms of how they make their way to the ground just by viewing the geometry. But the interesting thing is that it's done in such a way that there are myriad opportunities to create penetrations to bring in light from the outside. And that you do not see in the Hindu temples.
Yes, in fact, I didn't see. I mean, I don't know a lot, but I have seen. I even have presentations about Hindu temples. They are all kind of unvisited, so to speak, by light. I mean, this is what you try to say, that yes, there are differences, of course, but there is something, I don't know why, and I felt that there is also a possible connection with Islam. maybe in the way it is drawn here, because here you don't see. You are right about those, large openings through which the light enters the building. But here, in this drawing, plus it seems to have a part that is appears to be underground, but is not underground. It's just the drawing that doesn't show what is happening on the left and on the right side. Um,
This work really appeals to the engineer in me.
in what way? Because of the clarity of the.
Because of the clarity, yes, and the precision.
Yes. Well, it appeals to me as well, and I'm sure to many people, because it's also it's not just clear, it's also beautiful, and there is simplicity and complexity at the same time. One thing is for sure, architecture has to be creative. If it is not creative, it doesn't really deserve the word, the name. And that's, I am saying it to myself, and I'm trying to say to the students and to everybody, we have to be creative. In one way, it doesn't mean that we have to be arrogantly creative. No, it's very, very important, as Frank Lloyd Wright said, to inspire ourselves from nature. As Wright said, nature will never let us down. Unfortunately, even important architects like Winnie Maas from the Netherlands said this is a way to outsmart nature. I didn't like that word at all, outsmart. I don't think, and he is a very good architect, but I was very surprised that he used the word outsmart. How could the architect, someone who adores nature, to want, how could he want or she want to outsmart nature? First, it's not possible. But the language is so superficial. I don't think any architect of the past would have had this goal to outsmart nature. It's like saying outsmarting God, really, because Wright was in his way correct when he was asked, "Do you believe in God?" And Wright said, "I do, but I spell it nature." Well, if you spell God nature and you want to outsmart nature, this equals you want to outsmart God. This is not a
Yeah, it's
very.
the height of arrogance, really.
It is, and strangely, it is from a statement from a good architect. He runs. He's the founder of MVR TV in the Rotterdam, and he founded an interesting lab at Delft University called the Y Factory. But he did say he talked about outsmarting nature. I have a hard time to accept. Anyway, but it shows again, a certain superficiality that contemporary people have compared to the priest Guarini. I don't think, but who knows? Sometimes artists and maybe architects as well. Doesn't matter when they. I guess this is the passion. Transform the Corinthian capital into a, because I see the crown, present here. So maybe that's why it's called passion. But here I see this almost peacock-like aesthetics at looking from the on the plan of this building, this chapel, and also the diagram, the sketch, the drawing on the left. There are complexities here, And this is in one of his chapels. I forgot actually. I used to know, but I forgot what it is. Has something to do with with a shirt of Christ, or anyway. Um,
That is the image from the Turin Shroud, right?
what, this one?
That one, yes, for sure.
I don't know. I used to know a lot of things about it, but I totally forgot. So could you tell us a few more things about it, please, Mahadev?
Uh,
It,
well,
it,
it is claimed to be the shroud that Christ's body was wrapped in before his resurrection. And I have not studied this deeply, so
so
uh,
that's why it is called the Chapel of the Holy Shroud.
yes, and the shroud is there on display in that chapel.
Did you see it? Did you visit
No,
it?
I did not, but I've seen documentaries about it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah,
And of course, there have been various archaeological tests and things to try and validate whether it could have been from that era of Christ, but I don't think it is conclusive at the moment. Hmm.
yes. Thank you, Mahadev. So yeah, and some of these works, but this does move me, even if modern men or contemporary men sometimes says outsmarting nature. The fact that with the technological prowess that we do have, some people here are gathered in order to restore works that deserve to be restored. I like this, friendship in a way between all the masters and the present engineers and, specialists and so on. So not everything is bad in our day now. Um, Once we get rid of the pandemic, um, although there are other crises in store. Maybe one day, Mahadev, I truly would like to invite you, since you are very knowledgeable about this, to maybe to, if you have the time, to make a presentation or a talk, to have a conversation about what is called the environment uh, today, and the climate change, and
Mm.
what we are confronted with.
Yes, I would love to do that actually.
We would be very, very happy actually, and feel honored. And maybe you could also, I don't know if you would like to invite your students or not, but we'll try to invite as many people, because I am absolutely sure we can learn a lot from you.
That's nice of you to say. And we should schedule it for February or March sometime, maybe.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Mahadev. You are generous. Thank you. Look at this. I mean, God, I wish I did this, but I didn't. But it doesn't matter, it is a very nice work. And peacock. For somehow I think of the peacock. And again, the picture of the architect. Hello, happy birthday, Mr. Guarini, and other drawings. I don't know if this was done by him, the La Real Chiesa di San Lorenzo. We have seen San Lorenzo. This is the cover of a book he published, Placida Filosofica, Guarini. We recognize his name. This is an architect who was an intellectual and thinking mathematician and writer, and that's how architects should be, I think. But these days it's hard. It's hard, I guess, objectively. We have seen some of these things, not this particular diagram. This is actually rather contemporary. This was not done by him. But people, researchers, are still fascinated by his work and try to decipher its mysteries. Again, the glory of the dome, Guarini. The mountains are not too bad either, but those are not done by Guarini, nor could they hopefully be outsmarted. We have seen this palace, but we didn't see this one. I even wonder if it's by him, but somehow it made it to this presentation. Um, we are approaching the end, so in 1 minute at the most, we are ending our meeting today. But in 2 days, we'll have in fact, a very challenging presentation on Tom Main from Morphosis from California. And it will be his birthday. And because I have to be at the doctoral course at this hour, I propose to have 2 presentations on Tom Main, one at 3 p.m. Bucharest time and one at 8 p.m. Bucharest time, which would be more plausible for someone, for example, from the States. But I do want, I try now hard to create a PowerPoint presentation for Tom Main as good as possible, because I think the work of Morphosis is an important work, and he is an interesting man, sufficiently interesting to irritate Kenneth Frampton in a conference I took part in. I remember Kenneth jumping from his chair at one moment and almost screaming at Tom Main about something. I couldn't hear very well. I was in the back of the auditorium, but it means Tom Main is good if he was able to irritate actually Kenneth. Anyway, come on, Guarini. We already told you happy birthday. It's late here. Allow us to go. Please do not create this avalanche of splendid works. I'm afraid some of these images, because I didn't talk about them, but they were present on this presentation that I had parts of it. This one, I made it previously. Didn't expect to have so many, but I love this detail, this close-up of these bricks that love geometry and love beauty, and they just collaborate in order to create. I don't think, I hope this was not by him, although what I see on the side seems to be Guarini. Italian ice cream now perhaps would be nice. And this is the last image of my presentation and long night, and I apologize for it. Is the geometry of art and life, architecture, geometry, and priesthood, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, priesthood. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Fantastic.
Thank you, Mahadev.